Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Poultry Keepers 360 Live. We are happy you joined us here tonight. As you can see, Karen is not with us tonight. She's out having a good time and doing some fun things, and which I think is good for her. So we'll miss her, but we will muddle through this, just John and or Jeff and I. Tonight, we're going to be talking in just a few seconds about fall poultry care. Be right back. All righty. We've gone through and gathered up some more questions and just picked a few topics that everybody seems to have an interest in about getting the birds ready for fall and, of course, for the upcoming breeding season. Some of us start breeding at a much different time during the year than others. I know some folks have already got their breeding pen set up and rocking and rolling, so good for you. But for those who haven't, this show is for you. And first up, fall poultry care. And first question, how long before a show should I start feeding to improve feather condition? Well, if you're thinking 2 or 3 weeks, it's probably a little bit late. I start raising birds for show and feeding them the well right after, right after they hatch as chicks. And we've got a good program out there called Quick Start Chicken or Chick Program that will help you get your chick started right. But John, is there? I don't know why I'm calling you John tonight. Just smack me. Ah, man, yeah, I'll get it right in a minute. Is there anything that they can do, kind of a last minute thing, nutritionally wise, that could give their birds a boost in their feather quality?
Um, Nothing you're going to do in less than 21 or 28 days. So think at least a month, but I don't even think a month's going to do it. A month is going to help. But a lot of your primary feathers are not going to recycle in that time frame.
Right.
The only thing you're going to do is, if you increase the fat in the diet, and you put more fat in the oil gland so that when the bird's preening itself, you're gonna get a little bit more gloss and luster. But the actual true feather quality, happens all the way back in the follicle before that feather even actually emerges. So your timing for making the perfect feather, like you said, it actually starts all the way back at chick. But you're thinking about going through the molt correctly, coming out of the molt correctly with the right proteins and amino acids, and just good nutrition generally. Each molt gives you another chance to improve your feather quality. But realistically, the health of the bird and the feather follicle is going to be occurring all the way down at chick, soon after it hatched. So that's when you really got to be, setting the standard or setting yourself up for winning. Starts at the hatch.
You were talking about adding fat to the diet. What kind of fat would you suggest that they use?
We've talked about it a couple times, but most poultry diets are most successful above 5%, somewhere around 6 to 7% total dietary fat. Seems to be that optimum number. Even in young birds, depending on the breed, you can go, if it's a larger breed, you can actually go as high as 10% fat, but I'd start getting nervous going above 10%. So to me, 7% is a really great place to be. Again, that's all in timing, coming into winter, increasing that fat, that's extra energy. It's going to help the birds out through the colder season. It always helps them look better. You're always going to get a better feather shine by having the right fat levels in the feed. And if you read tags, which, everybody knows I'm a tag reader, most feeds out there, you're lucky to see 3.5, maybe 4%. And the reason is adding fat to a diet is expensive. Okay. Right now, to go buy the fats that they're adding, The cheapest fat out there is probably around 80 cents a pound. Okay. And I know that doesn't mean a whole lot, but to move a percentage point, 1 point of fat is 20, or 1% of fat on the label is 20 pounds of fat added to the feed. So every time you move that up 1 percentage point, you're adding $20 roughly to that ton of feed. So it helps hold cost down. Of course, people buy it based on cost. And that's not as much for this audience. I don't believe that's true as much as it used to be. I think, people, a lot more tag readers now, a lot more people paying attention to what they're putting in their birds. And I think there's a reward for it from the feedback I think.
Very good. Let's move on to our next one here. Is there a difference between chick starter and an all flock feed besides the name?
There is. A chick starter is going to have a different energy level. It's depending on the chick starter. It should have a different energy level, should be a little bit higher in energy. It's going to have better amino acids if it's a high quality chick starter. All flock means it's made for any age that you have on the farm. And so it's not going to be accurate for any one stage of, or age of poultry on the farm. However, some of the all flocks out there actually do have some of the better amino acid profiles. And that's why we've talked about them in the past,
Right.
Whether it's Purina flock grazer, whether it's Nutrienus all flock, whether it's Combox all flock, some of those have some pretty good amino acids and pretty good ingredients. So, you work with what's locally available, but you keep looking for something better.
Jeff, I think this was probably prompted. This was a question that somebody asked, and I think it was probably prompted because she was comparing primarily the protein levels between chick starter and all flock.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we always get hung up on, people get hung up on the protein first. Again, not the longtime listeners that we've had here at Poultry Keepers 360, because now they're looking at amino acids versus just looking at protein levels. But yeah, people that haven't been hanging around with you and I for very long, that's the first thing you look at, right? You go look and see, you get the best bang for the buck. So you're comparing protein levels. You're not necessarily looking at the ingredient list or the other ingredients or the other nutrients on the tag.
I know I used to be that way for sure. All I looked at was that protein number and not all the stuff I really should have been looking at.
How's your birds doing, by the way, Rip?
Doing good. Good. With this slightly little bit of cooler weather, they're eating more and they're doing well. I've got one of them out there who has decided to molt. I haven't quite figured out which one it is. I noticed a bunch of extra feathers going on out there. But
how old are they now?
They're about 6 months, a little over 6 months, I guess.
Yeah.
But these are all red males, and red males are notoriously slow to mature anyway, because of the heat we have down here. It's taken me in the past years. It's taken me almost 11 months to mature a red male. But where people up north can do it in 7 or 8 months.
Yeah, we have cooler temperatures, and so the feed intake is higher, and the birds are more comfortable up here. But yeah, I understand that. But, yeah.
Sue Dobson is admonishing me to keep those birds top secret.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know it was a secret. Sorry, Sue.
Let's see. What do we got next here?
Do you want to pop up? How many questions you got? I see Rob's got one.
Yeah, let's take Rob. Where'd he go? Here it is. Fiber. He wants to know about fiber. A lot of talk
Yeah.
about
His first one was, let's talk a little bit about the effects of having more fiber than fat. And actually, Rob, I like those two numbers to be pretty much equal. So when your fat is at 6 or 7%, I would really like the fiber to be same 6 or 7%. The two go hand in hand and they work together. People worry about the fat clogging up the villi and papillae of the digestive tract or the intestinal tract, and it will if you have too much fat and not enough effective fiber. So those two go hand in hand with each other. Ideally, I'd love to see, everybody knows I'm a proponent of oats, and part of that is those outer hulls on the oats. I'm looking for dense fiber. I almost always put alfalfa meal in my feeds, and I always have either oats or barley in there. And that dense fiber keeps the gut wall clean. It allows it to be a lot more efficient. We're getting better digestion and absorption. But you got to have the fiber if you're going to have the fat. So that was a great question.
very good. Here's someone who said, I've noticed a group of my birds started plucking feathers out of each other's butts. Is this nutritional or behavioral? I really tend to think it can be both.
You can. But the question, so part of the question, or part of what we needed to know here, whether or not they're eating the feathers. Okay, so if they're eating feathers, then it's a protein deficiency. If they're just pecking each other, particularly if it's right on the tail head, the large feathers in their butt, if their tail is bare, then to me that's always been crowding. They don't feel like they have enough space.
I agree with you. I think crowding can cause more feather picking than almost anything else I run up against. Uh, just not good for your birds.
Mm-mm.
I want to start setting eggs early in December. What should I do to prepare my breeders so I have good fertile eggs to set then? Well, probably the most important thing they can do is start adding supplemental light. That only not only gets the females into gear for laying, but it also gets the males into gear for breeding and being fertile. Um, it probably takes around 30 days for the females to get the full effect of the additional lighting. But males, particularly older males need much longer, up to 2 to 3 weeks longer than the females. So bear that in mind. So if you're wanting to start setting eggs in early December, I'm thinking you want to kick those lights on in late November, and the old males, get them on as quick as you can.
Yeah, I'd probably even back up a little bit sooner. And Rip, we need to make sure we let people know when you talk about adding light, you can't just go out there and go from 10 hours to 14 hours of light all at once, right?
No,
All you're going to do is shock them. So, folks, there's really good lighting schedules out there. All the commercial breeders will, they'll they'll give you great ideas. Here's the basis of it: is you can add up to 30 minutes of light per week. You really don't want to exceed 15 hours of total light. I'm going to speak from my experience. I see the best response as far as egg laying when the light is added to the morning versus the evening. Okay, so I don't see the stimulation. When I had my flock in the backyard and it was just a backyard egg laying flock, one thing was true. Those birds knew when sunset was, and every one of them was on the roost. Okay. They would, I could put supplemental light in there and it didn't seem to matter to them one bit. They were on the roost and they were starting to sleep. So by adding the light in the morning, we had better egg stimulation, higher production, more satisfied hens. That's just my experience, Rip. I don't know what you've.
Oh no, I agree. And the other thing I've seen is if you turn those lights off after dark, and there's no gradual step down to that. And if those birds for some reason have not already gotten on the roost, that'll really stress them out. I mean, they go bonkers there. So I always tried to set my lights to come on very early in the morning, even before sunrise, and go off before the sun set, just for that reason.
Well, I actually put my lights right above the roost, so they didn't have it. So I would actually give them 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes after sunset of light, so the stragglers could find their way to the roost and make sure that they had their place for the night. All right, and but you're right. You if you're using external lights, which I don't know how effective those are anyway, but I actually put the light right above my hens. Look, when we're talking about light, we're not talking about a lot.
No.
So in a 10 by 10 area, either a 40 or a 60-watt bulb is big enough for a 10 by 10 area. Actually, a 40-watt bulb is plenty. So don't even think about the 60. Because if you put too much light on them too fast, um, you can stress them out, and you could get them to start pecking at each other and becoming carnivorous. So just be careful.
Yeah, when we had our commercial white leghorn flock, we had a 90-foot long barn, and we had one 40-watt light bulb every 10 feet all the way down that barn. And,
Yep,
and that was it. And that was plenty.
that's plenty.
Cassie Arnold says, greetings. All my birds are full and in bed. So I guess this was an appropriate time to talk about lighting. So,
Yeah.
Kathy, good for you.
What
Should
other
I feed?
comments? Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, go ahead.
should I feed my birds differently during the fall months? What's your thoughts, Jeff? I
Well,
know
the
we should
birds.
in winter.
Okay, right. The bird. You made the comment earlier, Rip, that you noticed when it cooled off that the birds are eating more. This
Yeah.
is a natural behavior. So every chicken would like to eat for its calorie needs every day, right? And so it's going to, it's with the shorter days, the cooler nights coming, and winter about, they're going to start eating more. So in order to keep your egg size right and the health of your bird right, you will gradually decrease your protein and increase your energy levels, you know, uh, through the winter. This is when you want to be looking at a 16% protein type feed. You still want decent amino acids. Um, you don't need that 18. Pretty much around an 18, I would say May 15th through October 1st, depending on where you live, and then gradually switch over to a 16% for winter. For your maintenance feed, it still needs to be a good quality feed, but the birds are going to want to eat more, right? Or they're going to need more calories. So, look, folks, when the protein comes down, to replace that in a feed, the energy level goes up. Okay. So, the feed company's doing it for you, or should be. When that protein comes down, energy goes up. So, hopefully, they're not eating a whole lot more feed than they did in the summer, but they will want more. But you need to hold them to that, depending on the breed, roughly 4 ounces. And the winter time is a good time to supplement with a small amount of scratch grains just to give them a little extra energy on those really cold days. Now, look, when I say really cold days, a hen doesn't need anything extra until you get below freezing, which is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, that's when you start worrying about it. She is perfectly fine down to just about freezing, and she doesn't need extra energy. You don't need to have, you know, don't get crazy by feeding extra scratch or other feed extra grain. Otherwise, you're just going to make her fat. So let's not do that.
Um, when you say a small amount, I'm assuming 10% of their daily diet or less on the scratch grains.
Yeah, never more than 10%, right? I mean, never ever more than 10%. So 10%. Okay, so if they're getting 4 ounces a day, which is 0.25, the most you would want them to get of scratch is roughly a half an ounce of scratch grains. Um, I always kept some around, and actually, I would use it just as much for encouragement for exercise to get them out of the house. So if we had a fresh snowfall or something like that, they didn't, you know, the new hens didn't know what to do with snow, right? So they would stand at the door and look at it. So if I would throw some scratch out there, well, they're not going to turn down that opportunity. So they would jump right out there and realize, hey, this is fun. So they were fine in the snow, doesn't hurt them, and it got them some extra exercise in the middle of winter. Worked good. I was happy with it.
And they were too, I bet you.
Yep.
Jeremy wants to know, can you touch on an all flock or layer feed for chickens with roosters? I was told layer feed wasn't good for a flock, including a rooster.
This is true. And, you don't really want the extra calcium. You don't really even want the extra calcium for your layers if they're not laying. Okay. They don't need that extra calcium. So calcium builds up in the system. It can lead to renal issues, kidney issues. You can end up actually you're going to start triggering gout and other things. So, especially for this group where we've got a lot of people with mixed, roosters and hens, in the ambition of breeding, and I would prefer, my suggestion would be is to get, a good, 18% type layer, or not layer feed, but actually a good grower feed, and then hand mix the oyster shell into the feed so the hens can get what they need. The roosters can eat around it. They won't, they'll leave it in the pan. And that way, you're going to have less issues with calcium buildup in the renal system.
Good point. Um, Kathy Arnold says she still has some birds molting. Just a couple. Said most of them are through, but uh, you know, Kathy, we've talked about this, and we actually did two live streams, one on pre-molt care and one on post-molt care, and you can find them on our archives on the Poultry Keepers 360 YouTube channel. And folks, we've been talking a lot about feed formulas. If you'll go into the file section on Poultry Keepers 360 or Poultry Breeders Nutrition, most any of our groups, we have feed formulas in there that Jeff has created. And some of them are starters, some of them are growers, some of them are layers, some of them are breeder, some of them are specifically for molting and post molt care. So you could probably get a lot of the information you're looking for right off of those feed recipes in the group files section.
Before you take down Kathy's comment,
Yep.
I, I've noticed that some birds take a little longer to molt. Right, they just drag their mold out. And I don't want Kathy to do this, but I would really love for someone at some point, when they have a slow molting bird that seems like it takes too long, because you should be done with a molt in 45 to 60 days. Is actually process one, and look inside. My gut feeling is, and I can't prove this, so don't shoot me down here, but um, I would almost bet you that those birds that are slower molting are full of internal fat, and the internal fat is slowing down the molting process. I'd be willing to put a bet on that. So if overfeeding, full feeding, and particularly as the hens get older, they don't always burn off that fat. I'd be really curious how much internal fat's on some of those slow molters.
That that makes sense when you stop and think about it, Jeff. It really does.
Right.
Um,
It just seems to me that it seems to be the older hens, right? And if we don't control that feed intake, I'll bet you there's a couple handfuls of internal fat in there, and it's just slowing down the process. So anyway, that's my feeling. I can't prove it, but that's my feeling.
well, for somebody who's dying to check things out and let us know, we would certainly appreciate what you find.
Love to know.
Connie Graham has a question here. Um, so I live in North Carolina and I have been giving my birds bread scraps, scratch, and 16% layer pellets every day. I currently have
Oh no,
13 hens and one male. Oh, and no male.
no
No,
rooster chef.
sounds like I'm not feeding them right.
Yeah, I hate to say it, Connie, but no, you're not. You're killing them with kindness. So um, if you want to feed the scratch and the bread scraps, then you need to up that to a 20% layer feed to compensate for the extra energy that you're giving them, right? And you need to control how much of each of those you're actually giving them. I know it's going to be hard because it's fun to watch them eat when you go out there with scratch and bread scraps, but if you want them to live a full, long, healthy life, you won't keep feeding them that way.
You know, Jeff, something you and I have talked about, and I think we've talked about it on several different shows. But for those who really enjoy giving their birds treats, if they will hold back a little bit of their daily birds' rations and feed and mix it with some water and then make little round pellets out of it,
Hmm.
uh, you can flip those out there and the birds will absolutely go nuts for
Yeah.
them.
Any change in appearance, and particularly wet. I don't know why, but they love wet feed. But now I'm not saying go out there and wet your feed every day, but yeah, as a treat, to make some of it wet mash, kind of like oatmeal.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
Well, and at your suggestion, I started adding a little bit of molasses to it. And they think that's just the best thing since, no pun intended, sliced bread.
Yeah,
But
yeah. All right,
let,
what else you got, Rip?
let's take another question here. And oops, I'm not as efficient at this as Karen is. When and how should I start adding supplemental light to ensure my layers maintain production during the fall and winter? And we've kind of addressed that a little bit, but
We
uh,
did, but you never want your lights to you never want your lights to go below 12 hours. Okay, so and everybody's is a little bit different. So the closer you get to the equator, your hours are 12 hours, right? And whereas if you're in Alaska, you can have 22-hour days. So ultimately, you don't want your birds to drop below 12 or 13 hours of light to keep them laying. So if you want to maintain it, you need to find out where you are, light wise. Pay attention to when the sun comes up at 6 and goes down at 6, right? And that's really when you need to start adding light. Um, for us here, I'm in Pennsylvania. We should be adding light by September 15th. Okay, so it just depends on where you live, but the key is not to let them go below 12 hours of light. Once you do, and once they quit, right, that's their internal clock says, okay, or their cycle says, okay, we're done till spring. So you can stretch them out, or, you can let them molt and bring them back in the fall, but you're going to have to do it with artificial lighting.
um, well, we got another question really kind of related, so I'll save my
Okay.
comments here.
All right.
Um, Question: I recently saw an article about the danger of feeding alfalfa hay contaminated with blister beetles. Should I be concerned?
I don't know much about this. I know that the blister beetles are a really big issue for cattle and horses. Horses actually more than cattle. Um, I don't think there's any documentation out there about how it affects chickens. But again, I don't know. We're going out there into an area I have not studied or I have no prior experience. So I don't have an answer.
Tell you what, folks, Sue Dobson is the one that brought this up, but she posted a link to a PDF file from the University of Oklahoma, and I will go ahead and put that up in all our groups so you can take a look at it, and I'll drop it into the file section. It's kind of like Jeff said, they talked heavily about horses and cattle, but I got the feeling after reading that they thought chickens was kind of a gray area for them. But I just thought I'd bring that up tonight just to be sure. And we were talking about the wet mash. Um, Rob says, my guess is that they can taste the wet feed better.
I also think that it changes the smell.
Yes.
And it's amazing how well a chicken can smell, right? You wouldn't think so just by the way they're created, but
No.
yeah, they're really good at smelling. So wet feed smells completely different. I mean, it enhances and brings out other aromas that are hidden within that grain. So yeah, it's a good deal.
Let's see. We've got a few more questions that are really pretty good here. Alicia says, I have 5 month old birds, feeding them a formula Jeff made for the breeders I got them from. They are eating breeder developer at this time. I have watched birds from 3 different tractors feather eating. Does it always mean protein deficiency? Should I go back to a grower formula?
There's so much. There's so much I need to know here, Alicia. It's like what breed are they? What do they weigh? Um, are they? And she says they're eating the feathers, so that tells me that their amino acids are not properly getting met.
Right.
So I'd need to dig into this deeper, and it doesn't. And here's the other thing, folks, is feather eating can actually be a learned behavior that we need to be cautious of. So in Alicia's case, what I would consider doing is putting salt in the water for 3 days to stop it, right? To calm that down and break the habit. And let's see if that fixes it. And that ratio is 1 ounce. Well, it's roughly 1 tablespoon of salt for every 5 gallons. So you're going to want to work that down to your level. But it's one rounded tablespoon of salt per 5 gallons of drinking water dissolved in there. That's all it takes. A little bit of salt is your first defense for stopping birds from pecking each other. Okay, so it's American breasts. They could still be. I'd want to look deeper into that formula, Alicia, because it could still be an amino acid. But I would run the salt first for 3 days in the water and see if that cures it. Make sure it's not a behavioral issue, and if it's not, then reach out to us so we can tweak the ration and see. I wonder if it's soy-free feed. That would be the other thing. It's really hard to get amino acids right on a soy-free feed. See, so many questions, and I just, I don't want to take up the whole show, but it's very hard to get amino acids right on a soy-free feed.
Alicia, I tell you what, just getting ready to go out of town tomorrow. But if you'll send me if you can get a copy of the feed tag, send me a picture of it, and I'll see if what I can decipher for you. I'm no Jeff Maddox, but maybe I can get enough to get you by until he gets back.
Hey, Rachel and Baylor are going to be in the office
Oh,
answering
good.
phone calls and questions and emails. So if they email it to livestock and copy Rip so he can see it too, but email it to livestock@fertrell.com and explain what's going on. They can at least look at the feed formula and figure it out. She said it was a Fertrell formula, so I'm kind of confused what's gone sideways. Something doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So
And Alicia, put as much information and detail into what you said about, you know, specifically, are they indeed eating? Is it occurring at this particular time of day? Just even things that you think are insignificant can help to decipher what you're up against there. Okay. Oh, here's a good one. We were just talking about blister beetles. And Stacy Hubbard says, yes, I believe blister beetles killed almost a whole pen of grow outs. I did find some documentation. I can try to find it again and share it to the group. Stacy, if
that'd
you
be
can find that,
yep,
I'd like it.
yeah, me too.
Go on to our next question here. Would it be helpful to add electrolytes in my birds' water while they are at a poultry show? Short answer, that's a good idea. Electrolytes can help them deal a little bit better with stress, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's not going to hurt anything. Um, what I will throw in there is something else that can help is make sure you bring your own feed and water from home. Uh, some water at some shows can be absolutely horrible smelling and tasting to us. So I know it's got to be miserable for the birds. But if you can bring the water and the feed that they're accustomed to eating at home, they're not going to be stressing out quite so much. And we've got just magic chicken juice uh, electrolyte formula posted in all the groups. Just look in the file section.
Well, and I was going to say, so your typical foil pack electrolytes are going to be loaded with salts of different forms: potassium chloride, magnesium chloride, etc., calcium chloride. And I've had two or three folks go to the show with the homemade electrolyte mix that's already in the groups out there. They couldn't believe the energy level. The birds were calmer, but yet they still had a really good energy level,
Right.
and they continued to eat even with all the commotion going on. They had really good appetites, so it's working. I mean, just using that at the show for water has been making a really big difference.
Trying to see what we've got for other questions. They kind of got backed up on me here.
Yeah.
Rob says that his birds molt so slowly that it's hard to even notice. But I try and keep very young birds. Most might not molt.
Yeah. And there was a whole bunch of questions, about the oats and what kind. And look, it's just whole oats. They don't have to be fancy cleaned oats. You know, um, I mean, hopefully they're decent oats. You want to go check them out. You don't want them to be dusty or musty, but they don't have to be also the extra fancy cleaned oats. So just, making sure that they're getting some oats in their diet, whether they're for chicks, they're going to be ground. But, John even proved that, quail popping out of the shell are going to eat oats on day one. So um, they're gonna choke them down, and it doesn't take a lot. Usually a diet of 5 to 10% of the diet as oats makes a huge difference, and the birds just sharpen up, look a lot cleaner, really, because they're getting more nutrients out of what they're eating.
It makes a big difference. I have always been a fan of oats, and I know a lot of the old time breeders were a fan of feeding oats. Um, a lot of them even went to the trouble of sprouting oats. I thought that was a little bit of overkill and a little bit labor intensive, but I never did that. But I know some of them really, really were believer in sprouted oats. Go back through some of the questions here. We got
Yeah, Sue wanted to actually talk about the importance of choosing the correct bulbs for
good.
lighting.
Yes.
And so, look, don't go cheap. They actually make poultry specific bulbs. You can look them up. You don't need a high intensity. One of the big keys is you don't want the blue tinted. Like I get the warm white, and I really like the incandescent. So stock up on the incandescent bulbs, um, and before they make them all go away. But I always used the warm white incandescent. If you're going to use compact fluorescence, you need to verify the flicker rate, right? So you want the lowest flicker rate that you can get. Otherwise, fluorescent bulbs will also drive them crazy and cause them to start pecking at each other, just doing stupid things. Always be very nervous and anxious. So just choose your bulb wisely. Not any light bulb will work for a chicken. So,
I've actually seen studies about, studies where they were comparing the different types of light fixtures, incandescents, fluorescents, and LEDs. And if you read that report, you'll stay away from fluorescent lights.
yeah, completely. I mean, I really don't like them. You you really never see fluorescent light bulbs in a poultry house. In a large commercial poultry house, they don't use them at all.
What kind of lights are they using, Jeff?
Well, they're getting the poultry specific lights from the different poultry supply houses. And the reason they're doing that is I think they have like a 40,000 hour bulb life on them, and
Mm.
they're the exact right spectrum of light for poultry. So the intensity isn't too high, and we're not driving the birds crazy. So,
It's always amazed me that they can tune light bulbs to fit different species of livestock, poultry, hogs,
mhm.
cattle. It's that's always fascinated me.
Yeah. Yeah, Rob, you can add just a little bit of scratch to a well balanced 18% pellet. You'll be happy. Just don't get carried away. Again, that 10% is going to be all you'll ever want to do.
Got one here from Laura, and I know you probably cringe when I put these things up, but Jeff, thank you for always being so kind but telling the facts.
You're welcome, Laura. I just tell people what I've learned over the last 27 years. So, and I learn something new every day. Oh, hey, Rip,
Yes,
here's the latest, greatest. This is the hottest news. I didn't invent it, but I'm going to share it. And I've
late on.
actually experimented with it now for 2 weeks. Okay.
What's
So,
that?
uh, a poultry keeper contacted me and said, "What do you know about putting a penny in my watering bowl?" Right now, he has a half-gallon water bowl. He has individual pens. And I said, "I don't know," but I said it makes sense because that slow dissolve of copper into the water isn't going to be enough to hurt the bird. But here's the big deal. Everybody pay attention. It stops the algae from growing. Okay. So it cuts down how often you have to clean a water bowl. So here at home, I didn't want to go public with this till I tried it. I have a 1 gallon fountain water for my dogs and cats. I put 3 pennies in there. And normally after 5 or 6 days, I have so much biofilm buildup in there that I have to tear it apart and clean it out. I actually went 18 days, or
Wow.
no, I'm sorry. I went 13 days now without tearing it apart and cleaning it, and it still didn't have any noticeable biofilm in it. Something's happening. I'm not going to swear to it, but it definitely is making a difference. I'm not
I've
the only
actually
one
heard that
noticing it.
before.
Yeah. So if you're tired of cleaning out your water bowls and waters all the time, find the appropriate amount of piece of copper. I saw one person put like an 8 or 10 inch piece of just copper pipe down in the bottom of one of those 5 gallon fountain waters.
Mm.
and it was working for her. So it's working.
There you
So
go, folks. You heard it right here first. So if you can find any pennies, pennies are getting hard to come by. Oh,
I
I
got
want to.
I got plenty, but we still use them up here.
Oh, okay.
We still have a lot of penny pinchers in my neck of the woods.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Another thing that we were about to let slide by us, Laura, I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you a happy birthday, my dear. We appreciate you being so faithful and joining us here on the show, and you always make good contributions, and you share really good jokes with me, and I appreciate that. So happy birthday, Laura.
There's lots of questions. We could probably just turn this into a Q&A for the time we have remaining.
That's what I was
So
thinking. Um,
um, I got one.
go
So
for it.
Karen wants to know, true or false, giving cracked corn in the winter warms the birds overnight as they digest it. That is true. The other thing is, and this is what I observed from my flocks over the years, they really prefer to fill up and eat about 1 hour before sunset. There's some internal clock in those birds that they would surround the feeders and they would all fill up, right? And I could see the crop was just full. So either cracked corn or scratch, either one's going to give you basically the same amount of energy. So yes, just don't get carried away. Again, back to that 1/2 ounce of cracked corn or scratch grain per bird per day is going to be kind of your maximum number. But feeding later in the day makes a big difference in keeping those birds warm overnight.
I saw a question here that makes a lot of sense here. Um, Now I can't find it. Hang on. Oh, here we go. I have heard I need to be careful with oak leaves due to tannins. Should I worry about my waters getting clogged up with oak leaves?
No, I mean, it would have to be really bad. So, okay, yes, oaks are higher in tannin. It's more in the bark, some of the outer layers of the wood, for sure in the acorns, some in the leaves. Um, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Just know this, that tannins are actually a natural wormer. So as long as it doesn't get excessive, I don't think you're going to have a problem. But yeah, so tannins are a natural wormer, and I'm not telling you to go round up oak leaves and put them in your water either. But I'm saying I don't think you're going to have a problem with the oak leaves. Um, yes, oak leaves have tannins. I don't think the level's going to be high enough to hurt a chicken. So
I agree. We've got another question here. Is it okay to feed cat food, dog food, or catfish food to my birds to add sheen to their feathers for a poultry show? I,
rip.
I, honestly, I have never seen that work to be truthful, and I've
Okay,
been
now
around.
if you're feeding bottom of the barrel feed, okay, like if you're taking somebody's all stock, 12%,
Yeah.
yes, this will be an improvement. All right, folks, look, what's in the cat food, dog food, and catfish food that you think is making it? Why don't you look at those labels, right, and find the common denominator? What is common in all of those? And what's common in every one of those is meat protein. Okay. They either have a fish meal, poultry meal, meat and bone meal. They all have meat protein. So instead of buying cat food, dog food, and catfish food, why don't you just buy some fish meal or some type of meat protein and just cut to the chase? Then you don't have to put up with all the unwanted garbage that's in the cat food, dog food, and catfish food that your chickens don't really need.
I guess I always kind of went by the philosophy it was for cat dogs or catfish. Feed it
Well,
to
you
cat
were
dogs
right.
or catfish.
Yeah,
Don't don't feed it to your chickens.
happens a lot.
It does. Let's see what
And
we
if your
got next.
chickens get loose and they find the cat food bowl, they're going to clean it out. So
Oh, in a
because
heartbeat.
it smells good to them.
Didn't want to do this one now, but I will. If folks, if you're planning on attending the Ohio National Poultry Show early next month, be sure and stop by our booth and say hi. Karen Johnston and Mandolin Royal will be with me at our Poultry Keepers 360, but we're next door neighbors with the folks from First Trail. Jeff will be there, and some of his team will be there answering your nutrition questions. I think Jeff, you're going to have some poultry breeders and showbird supplement, as well as a boatload of your books there. So
Well,
chance to get a good.
I wouldn't say a boatload, but my whole team's going to be there, so everybody can meet Rachel and Baylor. I'm putting this is I don't think I told you, Rip, but we're actually working on putting together some 2 pound poultry show and breeder,
Cool.
just for people who want a sample size. Right? They're not convinced they want a 10 pounder or a 40 pounder. So for newbies that haven't been, hooked and addicted, then we will have some smaller packaging available. I will have some 10 pounders. I'm not bringing 40 pounders with me to the show. Nobody wants to carry them around.
I've often wondered why you didn't do like a smaller sample size.
It's only going to be for the Ohio National, so it's going to be a
Oh,
limited edition, right?
so get one and frame it.
Right, right. And I think there's only going to be about 100 of those made, and then I think it's going to be once and done. Don't quote me, but I think it's going to be a one-time good deal for the Ohio Nationals.
So get there early if you want to get one. I can see this coming now. Oh my goodness.
All right. What else you got?
Let's see. Shelly wants to know, is it all right for chickens to dig in wet straw or shavings? Mine love it.
Yeah, I
I,
mean,
I
I don't have any problem with it.
no, you see chickens,
Right.
they'll
You
get out
know,
there and play in muddy water. I mean, so
right,
I don't think a little wet shavings is going to hurt them at all.
right. I don't want them living in wet
No,
straw and shavings for an extended period of time because it's going to increase the humidity of the coop. But it's not, temporarily, it's not going to be a problem. So Shaggy wanted to know about black oil sunflower seeds,
hey Shaggy,
and so they're fine. Out where you are, Shaggy, actually, they're probably cost effective. Okay. For everybody else, they're not for what you get out of them. They're 17, 18% protein. They're about 30, 35% fat. Birds will shine up a little bit. They really are snack only. Um, they don't, for most people, they don't fit well in the diet uh, because of their cost, and their availability is a little sketchy sometimes. We were short on them. But, if I lived where you lived, I'd figure out a way to put some in the ration. But kind of look at them as snack only, um, somewhere between 2-3% of their diet. And, the birds love them. That's the honest truth. But I don't see how it really helps the birds at all nutritionally, right? It doesn't do anything on the protein side, but it would be a good fat supplement. Yeah, so if you want, I think the birds will shine up a little bit if you want to use a little bit of black oil sunflower.
and Jeff, I know a lot of people when they're coop training their birds for a show will use the sunflower seeds as encouragement to get them to do something or stand and pose a certain way. But honestly, for that, the best thing in the world I found is live mealworms.
Yeah,
You can hold a mealworm
yeah,
between two fingers, and you will have a bird's undivided attention when he starts wiggling and twisting around. But oh, one thing before we get too far that I wanted to mention that I didn't. Um, on the left side of this slide here, you'll see a banner. And if you can't find us any other way, we're going to have a 4 foot by 8 foot banner. Just look for that, or the bright green for trail logo. Either one will get you there.
I hope they all find us.
Yeah, I want to see everybody. Let's see here.
You got one?
I got one. If I can get it to show up. Was thinking of using oak leaves as bedding.
Yep,
Don't see anything wrong with that.
No, I've seen it done. Works fine. Just don't let them get matted down. Don't let them get too wet. You know, be willing to keep adding to it and replacing on a regular basis. But there's nothing wrong with oak leaves for bedding.
I know one guy in Alabama that rakes up all his leaves and dumps them into his poultry pens and uses it for bedding in there. And then comes springtime, they've turned it and churned it and scratched it around, so it got it all broken down. He just scoops it all out and uses his compost in his garden. So he's getting a double whammy bang for his buck out of that.
Yeah. Emmanuel wanted to know about using peat moss in the coop during the winter. Here's the downside, Emmanuel, is if the birds have wet feet, they're going to track it into the layer boxes. If they're laying, you could end up with peat moss. Plus, they're going to dust in it all winter long, right? So they're going to carry it into nesting boxes. And, so when they lay the egg and the bloom on the egg will attach and hold the peat moss. So while I love the peat moss in the coop during the winter, just know that they're going to track it on both their feet and their feathers into the nest boxes. If you don't care, doesn't hurt the egg, but it's really hard to wash off and it's really hard to sell those eggs. So just that's what I know about it.
Yeah, I've been there, done that, and you wind up with eggs that look like little kiwi fruits.
Yep.
So,
but the peat moss still is the premium bedding. So yes. if you can afford it and you can do it and you're okay with what I just described, I would do it.
Let's see. Rob says, I've been giving live mealworms to freshly hatched chicks, make them run around a bunch and gets them to eating. I wonder if it adds good gut bacteria.
I don't know. I've never seen a bacteria profile on the mealworms. It should.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's good gut bacteria already in the mealworm because it's alive and it's been digesting, so it should add to the gut bacteria of the chick, I would think.
Jeff, it makes sense that it would.
Yeah, it does. As long as they're good, clean mealworms. And, if Rob's raising them himself, I'm sure they are. And if he's getting them at a pet store, I would bet they are as well, because they can't take the liability, of killing other birds or animals.
Okay, folks, that winds up our questions.
There's one more that you had starred here.
I missed that one. Sorry.
Yep, that's all right. Our flock has 19% grower because we have roosters mixed in. With this protein level, will be harmful during the fall and winter when the hens aren't laying. I would, in this case, with that high of a protein, which I'm not opposed to it, I think you could go to almost 15% scratch grains going through the winter and leave them on this feed, and I think you'll be perfectly fine. So you can get some scratch grain, 15%. So for every 50-pound bag of this feed, you can add up to 7.5 pounds of scratch grain, or you can feed that separately or however you like, but that would be your 15%. And then I think you'll get through the winter in fine shape. Just don't get carried away on how much you feed them. All right.
Okay.
Did you see any others come in, or are we
I have not.
okay?
Oh, Rob says he raises his own mealworms. Good for
Nice.
you, Rob.
I kind of figured he did, but I
Doesn't
didn't.
surprise
You
me.
know, yep, doesn't surprise me a bit. So,
He's a good guy. I like Rob.
yep.
All right, got one more slide. Whoops, hit the wrong button there. Before we go, I want to remind everybody, be sure to listen to the Poultry Keepers podcast. Mantle and Royal, John Gunnerman, and myself are co-hosts on that show, and we have a lot of fun. We cover some really neat subjects. We post a new episode every Tuesday. So we just posted one this past Tuesday. I had a link to it in all our groups. So look for it. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Spotify. You can follow us on Amazon. Most any podcast platform you want, you'll find us there, or just do Google search. But I would encourage you to listen. We try to keep our episodes down to about 30 minutes. So we'd love to have you become a follower of our podcast. Jeff?
Yes,
That's
sir. It
it.
was a good night.
It was.
Answered
That's
lots of questions. It went well. We didn't stumble too bad without Karen, but we
no,
still
no.
missed her. Yep.
Well, I wanted to stumble enough that she felt needed when she came back,
Right.
and I think we
Exactly.
accomplished that.
Yeah. We did that.
So,
Oh,
ladies and
Kathy had
gentlemen,
what? So what time? Kathy was asking what time. Reference to what?
what?
I don't know. Kathy had a comment about said what time
I don't know.
with a question mark. Okay. Oh, maybe the
Oh, what
podcast
time is the
thing.
podcast?
Yeah.
Kathy, they post at 12 a.m. every Tuesday morning. And one of the reasons we post them so early is because that gives them time to get the RSS feed down to folks like Apple and Spotify and that kind of stuff. But they're available to listen anytime you want to.
I think we're good.
We are good, folks. We thank you so much for joining us tonight. We had a ball. I hope you learned a few things. So by golly, that's all I got for the night, other than to say so long and keep your birds happy, healthy, and productive.